now, and let me first introduce myself. My name is Balázs Kis, so we put together these presentations together with my colleague Gergely Vándor, but today it is Balázs Kis who will be the presenter. I'm one of the founders of QA Translation Technologies, and I was also instrumental in conceiving the whole tool, including the QA module, which wasn't introduced with the very first version, but it was very soon incorporated with the entire tool as it was being developed. So yes, this is our agenda for today. I'm going to talk about the basics of so-called QA, quality assurance in translation tools, because it might not be the very concept that you would think of at first, especially if you are not familiar with the QA tools that computers usually offer you. And then I'm going to talk about some best practices for making the whole QA process and the whole QA protocol more efficient. And then we're going into some details about what sort of automatic checks are offered by MemoQ. And of course, we cannot go away and cannot wrap up today's webinar without talking about the way to actually process the warnings that you receive from the computer when you perform this QA. Now, there was always a conflict, especially as the amount of the translation tasks grew over the years. There was always a conflict between the quality of the translations and the time available to actually maintain or assure that quality. So people were seeking, both translation professionals, translation companies, and software developers were seeking for methods to speed up the process of checking the quality of a translation. And one of these approaches is the automated quality checks. This is what is most commonly termed as QA, or quality assurance, in today's translation tools. And for me, I was involved with natural language technology before actually turning to the translation industry, and I worked an awful lot with creating spelling checkers, grammar checkers, and also machine translation systems. And to me, this concept of quality assurance tools actually are related to how a grammar checker or a spelling checker works in a word processor. This is more translation related, of course, and this is intended to speed up the quality check, which means that a QA tool, a quality assurance tool in a translation environment, includes or contains algorithms, logic to spot, how should I put it, spot signs of possible mistakes. And these checks are really, really simple. And there are signs of possible mistakes that are exhibited by numbers, specific sequences of letters or other characters, like wrong numbers, inconsistent terminology, double spaces, and the like. So what a QA tool is good for is to spot possible mistakes that don't require a human intelligence to spot. Incorporating human intelligence to this process is still a hard nut to crack. Right now, what well, I don't know how it is with your work, but what I found is that what happens is people run this QA checks, go through them, some of them, and then give the whole thing to the human reviewer, who might or might not work along the lines of these possible mistakes. So so what I want to say with this is that there is still no formalized connection between checking that doesn't need human intelligence and checking that does need human intelligence. This is a research topic we are currently working on. I work together with PhD students even. But today we talk about what is available, and that is the so-called quote-unquote traditional QA tools that spot mistakes that don't need human intelligence. And so what happens is there is a QA module that you can call up with a command in MemoQ. Those of you who are familiar with MemoQ's QA tool can actually try it or try it every day. And this QA tool processes the segments, the translations, and gives you warnings. And you can go through these warnings and either make changes to the text based on the warning or ignore the warning, so treat it as a false positive or a false alarm. And actually, MemoQ has two ways of creating these warnings. For one, when you do your translation and you confirm a segment and move to another segment, MemoQ checks that last segment immediately and gives you the warnings immediately. But there is also a so-called batch, quote-unquote batch mode, where you actually issue a command that you want MemoQ to run the QA checks right now on the whole document, on the whole project that can possibly consist of hundreds of documents. And then the warnings are created in one go, and in both cases you can call up a specific tab, a specific window that helps you walk through the warnings, and I'm going to give you more details on that as we go along. And I already received a question, and of course it's all very right because you can interrupt me with questions, and I would read it out right now because it's perfectly in place. Would the warning direct you to the segments where mistakes are found? Could you please show how it is done? The answer is yes, and I'm going to return to that. So I had the intention of showing that to you. But for those who are not familiar with the tool, we need to clear up some more concepts first. But I'm going to return to that. So, and what is true of possibly all QA tools around is that they are configurable and flexible, which means that you can turn checks on and off. It checks the text as you type, and if the warnings are created, the warnings are inserted there, or the warnings are shown you when you actually type the translation, you do not need to be directed to the segment because you get the warning where the segment is. It has its advantages, and it also has its disadvantages. This is also something that I will return to as we go along. And you can also choose to run the quality assurance on entire documents or translation memories or entire projects, and this is called the scope of the operation. And this is also interesting and important. And I even created a new slide compared to the former QA webinars, because this is something that was asked about in one of the support queries in recent days. So so this is how it looks like at first glance, and There's one more concept I need to familiarize you with before we move to the details, and this is warnings and errors. So most probably, when you start using MemoQ, you meet the QA module when it gives you a warning as you confirm a segment. When you get a warning, you will get an orange lightning sign. And this is something that usually comes from the QA module. It's about terminology, spacing, punctuation. And these warnings are not fatal. They can be ignored. So, and if I'm saying that, then it is only right to ask what is fatal. And that you can also get errors. Now, the difference between errors and warnings is that errors actually prevent the document from being exported. When there are errors remaining in a document and you ask MemoQ to export the translation, MemoQ will give you the message that, well, please resolve the errors first, because if I export the document as it is right now, there's a good chance that the document will be malformed, and for instance, if it's a Word document, Word will actually crash when you open it. And these are coming from the so-called uninterpreted text. When you import a document, especially if you import a legacy Word document into MemoQ, you might get tags between curly brackets. And between curly brackets there are numbers. And these are the uninterpreted formatting tags that mean that MemoQ knows that there is some sort of formatting instruction or image or whatever in the text, but it doesn't know what it is. And what you need to do is to make sure that the same uninterpreted tags appear in the source text and the target text. And of course, you can make changes to the target text, to the translation. So, so this is something that you need to resolve. But this is not; these errors are not coming from the QA tool. And if you are interested in that, I can direct you to a training video that explains the use of tags in MemoQ. Because right now we are interested in the QA warnings, which which might or might not be related to tags, inline tags, or formatting tags in the document. Because the QA warnings can be related to the properties of the text, as it is listed in this slide: terminology, spacing, punctuation, and so on and so forth. And although warnings are not fatal and can be ignored, it would in some cases it is not advisable to ignore them. In other cases, it is best to ignore them, but if you need to ignore an entire type of warning, it might also be advisable to turn that check off. So let me give you some best practices and details here. So the most important thing is that you need to use only those checks that you are interested in. So MemoQ can give you, last time I counted was something like 40 or 60, I don't remember the number, but a lot of different types of warnings. And these are related to a lot of different types of checks that MemoQ performs on the text. And there are a number of best practices listed here that include, like, you can ignore the warnings individually as they appear. Let me just switch to MemoQ here and look for a warning. I'm not sure if I will find any, but for instance there are some. For instance, it says several consecutive white spaces. So this is how you look at the warning at the location it is, exactly where it is. And there's another approach here, that you can open the Resolve Errors and Warnings tab from the active document, for instance. There are a number of those. And then you can go to the, you can see the text, and of the segments. Sorry for that. And you can also sort by the description. So I'm still looking at a way to jump to it. I think, okay, let's return to that later on. So I just wanted to show you these two approaches here. And you can have a list of warnings, or you can look at the warnings right where they appear in the segment. And you can use, there is a command that says ignore all warnings of this kind, so you can ignore a specific type of check. For instance, let me just show you something here. Invalid number format. This is my favorite because MemoQ has problems. There are chapter headings starting with numbers that include points. It interprets, well, you need to know that in the present case, the target language is Hungarian, and in Hungarian, you don't use the decimal point. You use a comma instead, like in German. And here, MemoQ spots the number, like table 1.1, which is quite correct in the Hungarian text this way. But MemoQ still complains about it because it sees a number that has a decimal point, and it shouldn't have a decimal point because Hungarian uses a comma, because these are not treated as numbers as far as the text goes. So what I click here is ignore warnings of all warnings of this kind, and these are already ignored, and I can hide the ignored items, and I don't get them anymore. There are a couple of others. So that I might want to ignore. So this is one of the benefits of the list that I'm looking at. And this way, even if there are warnings, irrelevant warnings, that do not pertain to any real mistakes in the translation, even then I can hide them by first ignoring the kind of warning and then hide the ignore warnings. But I think I can tell you better. I know we know better than that, because what if we don't even check for these things? What if we don't even let those checks run that provide us with the false warnings? And this is how what I'm about to show you right now is how you can set up so-called QA profiles in MemoQ, or QA settings in MemoQ. And what this slide says is that it might be worth tailoring your QA settings to your translation jobs and narrowing down the QA checks to those that you are really interested in. And this requires some effort and some trial and error. But imagine that you are working for a specific client and you work on specific types of texts. You work with specific language pairs. And if you set up the QA configurations, the QA settings properly, you will always get the right, or for most of the time, you will get the least possible false alarms or false warnings from the QA module. And you don't have to do it again. And in return, you spend less time resolving and walking through the QA warnings in the future. So, and the QA settings are considered a resource in MemoQ. That means that you can exchange the QA settings or a QA profile with colleagues who are also using MemoQ in files, or if you are involved in a translation organization like a translation company or a translation department, and that department or that organization happens to use MemoQ server, you can also publish these quality assurance profiles on the server. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Right now, what you're looking at, and I'm telling this to those who are not familiar with MemoQ, actually, I'd like to remind you, sorry for that, I'd like to remind you that this is not a beginner MemoQ course. So if you are seeking instructions or seeking a tutorial on the fundamentals of MemoQ, I can direct you to either recorded basic webinars or the training videos that are available from the Resource Center section of our website. So right now this presentation focuses on the QA module and the use of the QA module in general. Well, specifically, sorry for that. So what we are looking at is a MemoQ project. A MemoQ project has documents. You can see a list of documents that are being worked on in the project, and it has a couple of resources, and it also has settings. And among the settings, you have the QA profiles. So I'm going to settings and then the QA settings part. And what I have here is a list of QA profiles. And when I select a QA profile, MemoQ will start using the settings in that profile to run the QA checks. So whatever is turned on in that QA profile will be run. Whatever check is turned off in that profile, it will not be run. Let me give you an example. I'm changing the default profile into the default copy profile. That's an important aspect of MemoQ. You cannot edit the default resources. You cannot edit the default QA profile in MemoQ, and the reason for that is that with the MemoQ installer, the setup package that you download as part, well, that you download MemoQ in from our website, contains these default settings. And when you install or when you update MemoQ or upgrade MemoQ with a new installer, a new setup package, the default resources can be overwritten. And MemoQ doesn't allow you to edit the default profile in order to keep you safe from overwriting your edits. Imagine you made changes to the default profile, you set it up nicely, you turn off those checks that you don't need, you turn on and customize checks that you do need, and then an update comes and your changes are overwritten. But it is also important that we actually fix the problems with those default resources. This is why we opted to ask our users to first clone or make a copy of a resource and then edit the copy, just like I'm doing now. So when I go into edit here, I'm editing this QA profile, I get a window, a dialog box that has all sorts of settings. And all those settings pertain to a specific type of check, like consistent translation, like terminology, like I can get a warning if a target segment equals a source segment, and so on and so forth. And in each and every profile, these settings could be different. Some settings can be some checks can be further customized. I'm going to return to that because towards the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you an overview of what sorts of checks MemoQ has. Let me just return to the presentation, because at this point, I'm only encouraging you to actually put some effort into tailoring the QA checks to your needs. And that might need some effort, not much. But you might need to look at the text you are working with. And this is a new slide I've added to the older version of this presentation that might be interesting for those of you who have already watched an earlier version of this webinar. And because there was a question on our help desk a couple of days ago, and it was about how to restrict the warnings and the list of the warnings to the part of document that you work with. And I'd like to draw your attention to two commands in MemoQ. One command is the run QA command. That means that I'm telling MemoQ that I want it to check the current document, the entire project, or the selected text. And this is something that you can tell it, because at the top of this dialog box that says run QA, you can choose the scope of the operation. You can run it on the project, on the selected documents, the open documents, the locked segments, the active document. You can run on the active document from the current segment, or if you have one or more segments selected, you can run it on the selection. And when you actually want to look at the warnings in a list, in the Resolve Errors and Warnings tab, then you can also select the scope. So you could already see that, but I'm going to show you what it's all about. Again, some information or some insight for those who are not familiar with the MemoQ interface or the MemoQ environment. When you are actually working on a project and you are working on a document, MemoQ opens up tabs for you with the documents. This is how I edit a document. This is the so-called translation grid. And I get other tabs to work with other things, like like when I'm working with a list of warnings, I get another tab. But I'm going to close this tab right now, and I'm going to select some segments here. Like, let's go from segment 133 until 612, and then I take operations and resolve errors and warnings, and I get the scope dialog here as well, so I can select what segments I'm interested in, and MemoQ will give me the list of warnings exactly from those segments. So what I got is the list of warnings from those segments that were selected in the document. And this is extremely powerful if you use them together with the so-called views. You can, in MemoQ, you can create views from documents. Let me just give you a quick glance of that. Like, I'm selecting 7 documents here, and then I have a command that says create view. Okay, let's not select the first one because it doesn't like creating a view when one of the documents affected is open. Okay, this project will not work for me. Let me just, sorry for that. I used it as a this is a project that was already done. There was all sorts of restrictions. It was handed off as a job for multiple translators. What I'm going to do right now is to create the clear the handoff history, and maybe reviewer 2 will be okay. Let's try it again. Yes, that looks better. Again, so this is what I wanted to show you. So you can create all sorts of complicated views, and this is like a virtual document where each segment comes from a document. Where you have multiple documents, you can glue the documents together, you can extract the repetitions, you can choose rows. You can say that from this project I want to see those rows that are confirmed or not confirmed, or pre-translated or not started, or I can launch the advanced options where I can filter for text, or I can extract segments that have an unsuppressed warning. So there is a when I create a view, it's actually an alternative to looking at the list of warnings, and so on. So it is extremely powerful, and if you use the views together with the scope, it would be extremely powerful. Imagine that you create a view that contains segments that contain the word translation. On the source side, MemoQ will actually extract those segments for you, and then tell MemoQ to run the QA on that view alone. So you can narrow down your scope of checking the quality of your documents using views quite well. So this is about scope. This is how you can narrow it down. If you feel that this was not enough, you can feel free and contact me afterwards, or I can answer questions like the one I got right now. When I ran the QA check to see if there are segments that do not use translations from the TB, the QA listed many segments that in fact use TB terms correctly. The QA doesn't seem to recognize target terms. The target language was Japanese. Is Japanese not recognized? This is again something that I plan to return to, but my answer is, well, Japanese is recognized. It is not language specific, but there are a few things that might be worth knowing about languages that have inflections or suffixes. Because MemoQ doesn't use so-called linguistic intelligence to match together words or terms that occur in different suffix forms. The same problem exists with Hungarian. I'm going to be able to show you how to work around those. So I'm about to talk about the most important checks, so I'm going to return to this question in a few minutes. Right now, number checks. It's like you can check the number formats, that's decimal sign, thousand separators and mismatches, and you can actually customize in the QA profile. I mean, you can customize the number formats. Sorry, I didn't want that. I wanted to edit this. So if I'm editing the QA profile, I go into numbers and I can add custom number formats for languages, which means that I can select a digit grouping delimiter for numbers that are smaller than 10,000, or digit grouping delimiter with numbers for numbers that are greater than 10,000, and also a decimal symbol. And I know I can also turn off verifying the number formats, because it might or might not make sense to verify that the numbers are matched on the target side. When you translate into, for instance, if you have imperial units in the source text that you are translating, and you are using metric units in the translation, it would be foolish to leave this number check turned on, because what you need to do is convert the units. And MemoQ has actually automated methods to do that for you, but then MemoQ would first convert the units for you, and then raise a warning that the numbers do not match on the target side. So if you're translating from a language with imperial units into something that has into another language that uses the metric units, this is something that you need to turn off. And my mission here is to show you that you can turn it off, and you should not be afraid to turn it off. You actually spare yourself from a lot of false warnings. But then 5,000 in German is 5, and 5,000 in English is 5,000. So if you want to spot this, then you need indeed to turn that on and use the so-called strict interpretation. But again, MemoQ has problems recognizing section numbering and version numbering, and it can cause false positives if the majority of numbers, like what I was showing you earlier today, it was a text from a book where numbers come predominantly from numbers of figures and numbers of pictures, numbers of tables, and numbers of chapters. And if the numbers predominantly come from these parts of text, it's best turning those checks off, because otherwise you will indeed get a lot of false positives. So this is about numbers. Consistency check, that's an interesting one. And actually, you can check if the same segment was translated the same way. Well, this is one check. I need to mention this because this is a check that doesn't run when you are translating. So you need to run need to use the run QA command to run these checks. But that means that you can verify that identical segments are translated consistently, both from source to target or target to source. That means that you can spot those situations where different source segments were actually translated into the same target segment, which might or might not make sense. And you can also check if the target segment equals the source segment, where simply the source segment was simply copied to the target text. Again, this might or might not be a problem, but you might want to look at it. And it's important that I was talking about the scope earlier on, and you find the segment inconsistencies in the scope it is run. So when you say that I want to check consistency and you select the current document for the scope, it will check the consistency within the document only and not on the whole project. And it has nothing to do with the translation memory. It won't check the consistency with the translation memory. Oh, sorry, I just wanted to. And now we are at the point where most of you are asking about. It's about the terminology check. And it actually does verify if target segments contain the equivalence of terms found in the source, and if there is a term in source for a term encountered in target. But, and this is what the third paragraph in this slide is about. We are working with natural language, and in natural language, well, actually terms do not always appear in their dictionary forms. And what you use in a term base is actually the dictionary forms, or actually one lemma. This is what MemoQ tells you. It's a lemma, or a sort of stem of the term. And there are cases when the term actually changes when, excuse me, when it's used in text. So yes, you are right that the same problem can occur in German, especially if the German term, if the stem of the German term changes because it appears in a plural form. And this is something that you can help by actually editing the term base, because in the term base, and let me just show you something. I'm going to look at the term base here. I have a pretty big term base right here. I'm going to, let me just try to find the, let me just find the local copy, so it's gonna be quicker, because this term base is something like 7,000 entries. So look at the lower third of my screen. You might or might not see it well, but what I'm about to show you is that you do not need to that. So actually you can use prefix matching. This is something that is automatically done. So if the term in the term base is actually a prefix of the term that occurs in the text, so it was simply inflections, then MemoQ ought to find it for you. The problem always occurs when the stem actually changes. So let me just find something, for instance, because this is also a problem in Hungarian, find something that well, it's very, very, very computing, and that's okay. Let me just give you another example here. For instance, if memory in Hungarian is memoria. This is easy because in Hungarian also takes the word from Latin. But its plural is, let me just give you a bigger font here. So I'm going to exit from this, okay, exit from this, and I'm going to show that to you on the slide itself. I'm going to erase that. So it's memoria, but its plural form is memoriak. You can see the difference in the A, because it's an accented A in the plural form, which is a different letter. And in that case, if the text has memoriak, MemoQ won't be able to spot memoria. And what you can do about this in the term base is that you simply insert a pipe sign before the part where the stem changes. Like you know that it will be the A at the end that would change in the stem. And then you insert this pipe sign, and from this MemoQ knows that it's only this part it needs to match, like memory. And in that case, MemoQ should be able to spot the term. And what I'm getting in the questions pane, saying that I'm fairly certain that I have had this problem even when the term was identical, when there was no form modifications. If I'm familiar with this, no, I'm not. It ought to work. If this happens, it's a bug, and it should be reported to support@kilgrade.com. So please feel encouraged to do that, and maybe we could use an example of this happening. I'm using this pretty often, especially for the English and Hungarian language pair, and I don't really find unjustified warnings for that. So this ought to work. This is what I'm saying. But sometimes you need to be clever about setting up the terminology. So again, since I don't speak Japanese, I don't know if the same approach is useful for setting up in setting up in Japanese, but this is something I might forward to those who are more familiar with this and maybe encountered Japanese users who are actually working with this. Yeah, so feel free to remind me in a later email. I'm going to show my email address again, that you need answer to that, because I cannot give it to you right away. And okay, let me just, yeah. So this is how much I can tell you about terminology checks right now. Actually, about terminology I could go on for hours and hours and hours, but our time is running short, so I need to finish soon. There are also so-called tag checks in MemoQ. That means that these checks verify that the target segments contain the same tags as in the source, and there are no extra tags in the target. And it's about the so-called inline tags. Like, let me just find some for you where it has, yeah, something like that. The source of this document is a Microsoft Word file. And you look the inline tags here, and you can see you can choose how detailed forms you want to see of those tags. Like there are the long inline tags that has all sorts of details about the tag, and this might be of interest to you if you are familiar, if the document is very structured and you are familiar with the XML intricacies that actually are in the document. Or you can just, if you are not interested in tags, you can look at the tags where all you can see is that there is a tag, but you are not interested in what type of tag that is. The default display of these tags are this. So you have the label of the tag, and that's it, and you don't have the so-called attributes, the rest of the details of the tag. But MemoQ, when it checks for the tag problems, and let me just return to the QA profile. There is a tab that is called inline tags. It can verify the well-formedness against source. When it's about inline tags, it's always some form of XML, even when you are not aware of that. For instance, the new Microsoft Word formats are XML, like docx, XLSX, and PPTX are XML, and these have a well-formedness conditions. Well, the warnings you get from these checks is that, well, an inline tag is missing from here and there, please insert it. Or overlapping tags that could be illegal for that document format, or Unicode characters that are not supported in the target language, and or missing or extra tags. And talking about characters, you can also control how MemoQ treats the spaces as capitals or characters. For instance, you can raise warnings if one or the other, if some characters, you don't want to see some characters in the target because the target language doesn't support them, and maybe if some sort of character appears in the target, that's an indication that the segment is not properly translated. So this is also something that you might want to check for. And I forgot to talk to you about one thing here, is that there are two things actually. First, MemoQ has this concept of a forbidden term. When you are setting up your term base, you get a checkbox that you can make this translation, make a translation forbidden. So you can, in a term base, you can actually list those translations that you don't want to use, that you don't want to allow to be used. So what I use this for is to spot specific types of errors. So what I actually list in the term base is the words that actually are translated incorrectly, that are usually translated incorrectly. And in the place of the translation, I list the incorrect translation. I make it forbidden. And when this source part, source expression, and its incorrect translation appear in the text, I'm going to get a warning. This is extremely powerful. I could just encourage you to use it. And there's another checkbox here that is very humble. It's about checking auto-translatables. Now, auto-translatables, if you are familiar with, well, regular expressions, you can set up translation patterns, sort of automated translation. I use that to translate numbers of figures or tables. Like in English, it's figure 1, but in Hungarian, you write the number first and then the equivalent of figure. So you can actually set up a pattern to make this conversion. And then you can check the translation if everything is properly translated like it would be translated by the auto-translatable. So that it means that the translation patterns, you don't use the translation patterns to automate the translation, to automatically insert converted values or anything into your translation, but you are using it as a ruse to check the translation against. This is what this checkbox does. And yeah, returning to your to the question on the term-based checks, again, Japanese words do not change forms like you just demonstrated. Thank you for the information. Target contain Japanese terms exactly the way that term-based has. Still, QA spotted those segments that correctly contain those terms. Again, all I can say is that if this is happening, it's a programming error, and I encourage you to report that to support@qgrade.com as soon as possible, at your earliest convenience, maybe along with an example that we can use to reproduce the problem. Okay, let me tell you a few words about the Resolve Errors tab, where you can review and correct the excuse me, the list of warnings. Let me just return to that. I have already shown you the most important parts. For me, the most important feature of this is that I can sort by description. That practically means that I actually sort by the type of the warning. It's even better to sort by code, because then you really are sorting by the type of the warning. Because if you want to ignore those, you can just click ignore warnings of the all warnings of this kind, and then hide ignored items, and then you actually got rid of a lot of false positives that are represented in that type of warning. Now you can also apply automatic correction if it offers. Well, it means that for instance, if this apply automatic correction link is enabled, when it is not grayed out when you can click it, then it means that MemoQ can change the segment, correct the problem, like there were 2 spaces and you need only 1. And there are shortcuts for those as well. You can move to the next item. You can move to the then the problem is no longer there, or you can ignore all warnings, this warning, and go to the next one. And you can see the document name here. You can see the document, the number of the row here. Actually, much to my embarrassment, I found no way. I was pretty sure that I can double click here and it will take me to that segment in the document, but this is not happening. This is something I'm going to report to the developers. But still, because I boldly answered earlier on to a question that this is something that can be done. Well, it can be done. I can switch to the document manually, like it's chapter 01, and then jump to row 258 by calling up the go to next segment window and typing 258 here and click OK, and then it gets me there. So it can be done. It's not automatic. But actually, I was using a keyboard shortcut to call this window up. But you can also use the go to next settings. It's Control-Shift+G, go to next settings command, where you can actually type a row number, and it will get you there. And you can also confirm the segment, or confirm the segment without saving it to the to the translation memory. Yes. Basically, this is it. I'm still taking questions for a few minutes. I already have one more. In Hebrew, I need the suffix and not the prefix to be recognized as a term. How can I do that? Well, quite frankly, this is still something that is a problem in MemoQ. We're working on solving that, so it's not easy at this point. So it's not supported at this point to use a suffix matching. It's on the short-term roadmap, and we're going to fix that. When I run QA and get to the resolve errors and warnings tab, and I try to sort the consistency results by clicking description or code columns, I get all the consistency results listed together. That is to say, all the inconsistent target segments grouped together by each source segment they share. Otherwise, I waste time. Waste time going up and down the unsorted consistency results. Well, actually, that is true. What I usually do about this is that I do not use this list for consistency problems. It's not the best. What I usually do is create a view, because you can create a view that consists of repeated segments. So what I usually do is run the QA, have the inconsistent segment warnings in the segments actually, but when I create the view, I'm extracting the repetitions, all occurrences, not only one. Or if I go into advanced options, I extract the repetitions by specifying 2 as the minimum frequency, and then I ask for an alphabetical sorting by source. And this way, in the view, I get a list of segments that, and also I want those segments that have unsuppressed warnings. And this way, I get a list that contain those segments that occur at least twice and have a QA warning. So most of these will be inconsistent translations and will be grouped together. So you will see the same text with the different translations in a single group, and you will be able to actually correct it by creating this view. This is what I usually do when I have to sort out inconsistent segments. I do not use the resolve errors and warnings tab. Well, like I said, it's not a silver bullet. Sometimes it's good to use, sometimes it's not as good. Okay, double clicking on the error message works okay for me. Good for you. I'm on the same version, so I'm going to check it. How can we generate a QA log? Well, this is something I didn't try many times, but what I'm going to get here, let's just make a test, a quick test here. Documents. And I'm going to documents. What I did, I just I got an HTML file, QA report. Maybe it's just statistics. No, it isn't. So yeah, you actually, I never remember what that will be, but yeah, you go into resolve errors and warnings, and you take export report. And you get an HTML table that opens in your web browser, but you can see it's a table, so you can simply select the table and paste it into Excel if you want to work more on it. So you get a statistics, and you also have a list of all the QA warnings that you have. How should I enter terms in the term base where the singular and plural form just have the first letter in common? For example, Baum, Bäume. In that case, I enter both variants, because you can have alternative terms in the same single entry. So in that case, I would enter both of them, and MemoQ will recognize them. And yeah, I'm at the last question, so please be quick if you still have questions. And while you are still thinking on more questions, I'm going to ask you another question about this webinar that you have just watched. Please answer in 30 seconds if you can. And while you are voting, I'd like to thank you for your attention today and thank you for your time today. And I'd like to welcome you to more webinars in the future. And I would also like to you to get the most out of MemoQ as you move along. So thank you very much again for attending, and have a great day or have a great evening, depending on where on the globe you are. And please take care. And well, if we don't meet in a webinar in the future, I wish you a great end of the year. But I would also like to welcome you to our end of year webinar that is called This Was 2011, and it will occur on the 19th, and István, my colleague István, and myself will be delivering it. So thank you very much again for your attention. And if any questions were unanswered, please feel free to send us an email, either to my email address or to support@kilgrey.com. Thank you very much again. Goodbye.